Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki. Quote Pramanande. Just a second. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiret Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. Okay, that's the watching this. Okay, Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. We are reading from chapter 21 of the 11th canto. Before we start going through the verses, can anyone tell me what we studied yesterday? Any points from yesterday? Zach, what do you remember?
I actually don't remember.
I asked you a question yesterday night. Do you remember that? It was about. Okay, so basically what I asked you is there any point of engaging in sense gratification? And what did you say? There is no point. That's what he said. Okay, thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot. I did that like special roommate offer, so I put you on the spot. Anyways, yesterday Jayadeva Maharaj was talking about how Krishna is telling Uddhava that there is like in the end, like this world is a miserable place, and there is you can try to find for happiness, and even if you find some happiness, first of all, it's very hard to like expect that there's going to be happiness in this world, and even if you find it, there's a beginning and an end. And so intelligent persons do not take pleasure in such kind of like temporary happiness. So today we going to come to 21st chapter, whose title is Krishna's explanation of the Vedic path. I think yesterday's chapter was about pure devotional service. Now he talked about in detail about what pure devotional service is. If you remember the day before, he was talking when Prabhupada Priya spoke. It was a lot of things about what are different aspects of devotional service. I think she also asked us like what strikes you the most, if I remember correctly. Like there was maybe it was before. Okay, that was Kalakanta Prabhu. Then we had a nice discussion about which part attracts us the most. And I think towards the end there was a point that to see good and bad is like still like a material quality. Like so one should transcend above that. And naturally that put a question in our head, like what does that mean? Should we not discriminate? Like how do we function in this world if we do not discriminate between what is good and what is bad? And so Krishna actually goes more into detail on that particular question, like when do we need to discriminate and is it helpful to us? So in order to get to that part of Krishna's answer, we'll start reading the verses, and as we read, I'll make some comments. And we can start with Stephen.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Those who give up these methods for achieving me, which consist of devotional service, analytical philosophy, and regulated execution of prescribed duties, and instead, being moved by the material senses, cultivate insignificant sense gratification, certainly undergo the continual cycle of material existence."
Steadiness in one's own position is declared to be actual piety, whereas deviation from one's position is considered impiety. In this way, the two are definitely ascertained.
we're going to focus more on this particular verse, like especially about this part, that steadiness in one's own position, and what does that mean to be steady in one's own position, and why that's very important. Okay, we continue.
O sinless Uddhava, in order to understand what is proper in life, one must evaluate a given object within its particular category. Thus, in analyzing religious principles, one must consider purity and impurity. Similarly, in one's ordinary dealings, one must distinguish between good and bad, and to ensure one's physical survival, one must recognize that which is auspicious and inauspicious.
Krishna is basically trying to answer the doubt that we had, that we have to analyze objects in its category. We cannot just think it's all like, cannot just see everything is just good in itself. And it is actually like intelligible, at least based on the position that we are at, to consider purity and impurity, so that we can actually come to the stage of being pure. If you already assume that it's all good and I'm already pure, then we'll never strive to like attain that purity. So in ordinary dealings, one should distinguish between good and bad, and it's very important to ensure one's physical survival. One must recognize that which is auspicious and inauspicious, like a very practical point. Like forget about like being Krishna conscious, but to maintain our body in this world, we have to distinguish between positive and negative aspects.
I have revealed this way of life for those bearing the burden of mundane religious principles.
Earth, water, fire, air, and ether are the 5 basic elements that constitute the bodies of all conditioned souls, from Lord Brahma himself down to the non-moving creatures. These elements all emanate from the one personality of Godhead.
My dear Uddhava, although all material bodies are composed of the same 5 elements and are thus equal, the Vedic literatures conceive of different names and forms in relation to such bodies so that the living entities may achieve their goal of life.
O saintly Uddhava, in order to restrict materialistic activities, I have established that which is proper and improper among all material things, including time, space, and all physical objects.
So he wants to like make some distinction between different material activities. That's why he's clearly explaining like what is proper and what is improper, but then he will clearly mention that that is not like a hard and fast rule that this is exactly proper and this is improper. Like based on situations, one can, and based on instructions that we receive from scriptures, one can understand what is proper and improper. It's an interesting verse. Yeah.
Among places, those bereft of the spotted antelope, those devoid of devotion to the Brahmanas, those possessing spotted antelopes, but bereft of respectable men. Provinces like Kikata, and places where cleanliness and purificatory rites are neglected, where meat eaters are prominent, or where the earth is barren, are all considered to be contaminated lands.
I was thinking we are in a contaminated land because of many things that we read here, but I don't know exactly what is the significance of a spotted antelope. And Gopi says we have that in Florida. Is that just a deer? What is it? Okay. Okay. We will find later if someone. Oh, okay.
Because it's also saying that there's spotted antelope will be recognized and maybe they're around and they're not around in the season.
Yeah.
There's always a community that saves in forests.
Yeah, that's the most crucial factor. We cannot just like hope to breed spotted antelope and purify our land. We need respectable men. Yes, Anthony.
More on her point, like what conditions would lead to spotted antelope being there? So it might be like pristine conditions that the Brahmanas seek out to be in to help with their purity. So they might be like physical conditions, something unbeknownst, you know what I mean? It just leads to the question, like what brings spotted antelope to an area?
Let's see if the commentators have commented on this. Okay, I'm just gonna read this. It's not a big, maybe the first paragraph. The word Krishna Sara refers to the spotted antelope whose hide is used by brahmacharis residing in the ashram of the spiritual master. Brahmacharis never hunt in the forest, but rather accept skins from those animals already deceased. The skin of the black or spotted antelope is also used as a garment by those receiving instruction in the execution of Vedic sacrifice. Therefore, since sacrifice cannot be properly performed in areas bereft of such creatures, these places are impure. It's very nice. We don't have to speculate much.
If they lay it down on their seat, then for some reason, snakes and scorpions and stuff don't crawl up.
So that's why it's like important for the people, the yogis who meditate for long times, to have like a deer skin on which they sit, so that they can just be immersed in the meditation and not be worried about like little creatures.
Does it say in that avoid predators? Is that like most of the beginning of that?
It's nothing about predators. The brahmacharis never hunt in the forest, but if an animal is already deceased, then they take the skin of that. That was an interesting topic, but yeah, let's continue reading.
A specific time is considered pure when it is appropriate, either by its own nature or through achievement of sustainable paraphernalia. For the performance of one's prescribed duty, the time which impedes the performance of one's duty is considered impure.
This regard, does anyone have what is said to be the most pure time for us, practicing devotional service? 3 a.m. Yeah, the early hours. I think it's 2 or 3 hours before sunrise is considered. Hour and a half before sunrise is considered Brahma Muhurta. That is Prabhupada emphasized having Mangal Arati. Mangal means auspicious Arati. We pick up the Lord, we offer our worship to Him, offer our prayers to Him, and we chant and we do meditation in that time, because it's this every day when you do astrology, there's a Amrita Vela, a time where the nectar is most prominent. It's usually what I've seen, it's during the early hours, but it means that we can tap into easily tap into the source of nectar or calm, peace, make our mind peaceful and engage in meditation if we practice that in those early morning hours. Okay, Advaita Prabhu. 10.
An object's purity or impurity is established by application of words, ritual, the effect of time, or according to relative
Impure things may or may not impose sinful reactions upon a person, depending on that person's strength or weakness, intelligence, wealth, location, and physical condition.
Okay, I guess we've read here.
Various objects such as grains, wooden utensils, things made of bone, thread, liquids, objects derived from fire, skins and earthy objects are all purified by time, by the wind, by the fire, by earth, and by water, either separately or in combination.
A particular purifying agent is considered appropriate when its application removes the bad odor or dirty covering of some contaminated object and makes it resume its original nature.
If you think about practically in terms of things that we clean every day, some things might just be good enough if we dust it off, but for some things we need water, and for some other cases if something has a bad odor, we probably need to soak it with some detergent for a while, to remove. So it's interesting that it said the Krishna is talking about dishwashing, I guess. Nanda is very happy.
The self can be cleansed by bathing, charity, austerity, age, personal strength, purificatory rituals, prescribed duties, and above all, by remembrance of me. The Brahmana and other twice-born men should be duly purified. before performing their specific activities.
This is again a very nice point that we can cleanse ourselves by bathing, that externally, like bathing, charity, austerity, age. I'm not sure what that means, but Gopi, probably have any comment on this?
Oh yeah, age. When you get age, yeah, you get older, you get your material desires just naturally decrease.
Yeah, you get purified internally, right?
Yeah.
Like the point we're talking
You
about,
get stronger internally when you get older sometimes.
Yeah, we get more and more realizations as we go. I think Gopi has a comment. Oh, you had the same point. Okay. And also, it says, above all by remembrance of me. I was remembering that verse that we chant before, like, usually before initiations, like, Yap Smarit Pundarikakhya Sabhaya Abhyantara Suchi, like, one who remembers Pundarikaksha, the lotus-eyed Lord, gets purified internally and externally. So Krishna points out that that's by remembering Krishna, we get internally and externally purified.
A mantra is purified when chanted with proper knowledge, and one's work is purified when offered to me. Thus, by purification of the place, time, substance, doer, mantras, and work, one becomes religious, and by negligence of these 6 items, one is to be considered irreligious.
Okay, I'll read it. Rahul, did you read? Okay, I'll just continue. Sometimes piety becomes sin, and sometimes what is ordinarily sin becomes piety on the strength of Vedic injunctions. Such special rules, in effect, eradicate the clear distinction between piety and sin. I was mentioning this before that. Like, I was just telling Stephen the other day that usually, like, someone's poop is considered, like, of course, unclean. But when it's cow dung, we use that to purify our homes. Meet is a big advocate of that. In fact, gifted Rasika Prabhu a cow dung patty, which is sitting on his desk now. And how do we make that distinction? Because the Vedas tell us that this is what is pure and this is what is impure, and we cannot use our common judgment that all kinds of our own excreta is considered impure, but a cow is such a sacred animal that its dung is considered pure. Conchal is a bone, but it is used for offering water to the deities and for blowing in the beginning of the arati. So that is another example. Any other examples that come to mind that usually we would think of those things are impure, but because Krishna put it on his head, peacock feather is glorified. Yak tail. Okay. Oh yeah, it's the tail of an animal, but it's used in serving Krishna. Yes, Advaita Prabhu.
It's the same with the cow urine.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, but because it's Krishna, it's the best. It's Advaita Prabhu. Can you pass the microphone?
Also, I was thinking in terms of our activities, sometimes they are considered sinful, but if there's a high principle involved, then they actually can become most suspicious.
Can you give an example?
Well, breaking the law. But if you're saving a life, going there was one example, actually, Sudajiva Prabhupada disciple, his son got run over with a tractor. It was an accident, right? Mm-hmm. So he jumped in a car, grabbed his son, jumped in a car. It was speeding, of course. But he didn't, and he was chased by the police too. But he didn't stop until he reached the hospital.
Oh, I see.
And deliver his son to the doctor. Then he had a talk. Then he had a talk with the police. And then the police was like, okay.
Yeah, based on situation, some things can be considered right or wrong. You can just keep the microphone there.
Yeah, generally considering lying is a sin, that it's not a good thing. But if you see in Mahabharata, Yudhishthir Maharaj was asked to lie that Ashwasthama is dead.
Yeah.
But he hesitated, he did not.
He was very attached to his principle that I never lie. Yeah.
His principle. So at the end, when they were going in north, he was shown the visuals. Not it was not a real hell, but he was just shown the visuals that all his brothers and in hell. It was just like a screensaver, you know.
Screensaver. Okay.
Yeah, and somebody moved the mouse after that.
Okay.
So lying is considered a sin, but when Krishna says that you lie, then that lie is absolute truth.
Yeah, the higher principle there was like following Krishna, obviously, and then obviously to undo the wrongs that were done by the Kauravas. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, we continue reading. It's a few more words. Yeah.
Activities that would degrade an elevated person do not cause fall down for those who are already fallen. Indeed, one who is lying on the ground cannot possibly fall further. The material association that is dictated by one's own nature is considered a good quality.
That's a very interesting point also. I would just like to mention on this, comment this point that one who is lying on the ground cannot possibly fall further. I was just reminded of like the 4 ashramas, like brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. Like growing up, I thought like when a brahmachari, when they take up grihastha ashram, they had to fall down, and I used to like worry about that. And when I asked that to Kalakanda Prabhu, and even Prabhupada Priya mentioned that in our class, like brahmachari is the first like step that you take, so you cannot fall down from like the first step that you're there. Like maybe if you taken a vow to follow the 4 regs and you don't follow that, that's a different fall down. But when you go to grihastha ashram, you're not having a fall down. So it's better to like do that, like if you have sense desires, like any material desires, to be able to truly address them by going up to the grihastha ashram, but it's not a fall down. That's what I was reminded of. That. And also the same activities that would degrade an elevated person, it also reminds me that sadhus are like specially empowered souls. They might be able to do something. Like it's said that Lord Nityananda, like, I don't know, Lochandas Thakur or someone says that if you see Lord Nityananda going into the bars, just know that he's going there to preach. Like you cannot, like, because it's Lord Nityananda, like what else like would he do there? But we cannot imitate those like our sadhus. Obviously, like we go around the downtown area to preach. Necessarily, we don't go inside the bar, but we get the people outside. But the point is, we have to be conscious about what would make us fall down and not try to copy like a senior. So,
by refraining from a particular sinful or materialistic activity, one becomes freed from its bondage. Such renunciation is the basis of religious and auspicious life for human beings and drives away all suffering, illusion, and fear.
Accepts material sense objects as desirable certainly becomes attached to them. From such attachment, lust arises, and this lust creates quarrels among men.
From quarrel arises intolerable anger, followed by the darkness of ignorance. This ignorance quickly overtakes a man's broad intelligence.
We have a couple more verses.
O saintly Uddhava, a person bereft of real intelligence is considered to have lost everything. Deviated from the actual purpose of his life, he becomes dull, just like a dead person.
Because of absorption in sense gratification, one cannot recognize himself or others. Living uselessly in ignorance like a tree, one is merely breathing just like a bellows.
That's all we had to read for today. Does this part, this particular translation remind anyone of some similar incident from Bhagavad Gita? Not incident, like instructions from Bhagavad Gita? That says, yeah, that's what I was referring to. You can mention that, yeah. That whole like sequence of events that leads to ultimately fall down.
So first is contemplation. As you contemplate, attachment arises. Now, if you don't stop it there, that attachment will grow into the excessive attachment.
Karma, yeah.
That
Hankering
also
to
refers to karma. And at that point, you can't control it.
And then after that,
it has gone too far. And then with karma, lust, it's always a loss. If you satisfy, the greed will come. There's actually two sisters of karma. Krodha,
anger and
lobha.
Okay.
So if you satisfy it, the greed will come.
You want more and more of it.
You want more and more. But if you don't, then anger will arise. From anger, there's a pillar, forgetfulness. So from forgetfulness, bewilderment to memory, and then you're down to the whirlpool of.
Yeah, then you don't remember what's right and wrong, and ultimately you have a fall down. I was just thinking that what he said, like, if you satisfy that lust, greed comes. And the problem of this material world is, it's not always that, it's not designed in such a way that it'll keep satisfying your lust. Like, you will ultimately never get satisfied. And the greed keeps on increasing, and ultimately, there'll be a point when you cannot fulfill it. But then the attachment has become so strong that you get not just angry, like you end up doing like crazy things. So before I ask Rasika Prabhu to mention this point, I was thinking, I liked what he said, that you have to stop, like when you're at an early stage, like when you're starting to contemplate on this object of senses. You cannot be like, I'm just thinking about like fulfilling this desire. I'm not actually engaging in that desire. So maybe it's harmless. I remember like from my school days, like I had like such an incident. I was just reflecting that there was a person like to whom I was attracted to, but I was like, I'm just contemplating on them. Like I'm not like doing anything. It's probably doesn't matter. But in due course of time, like my attachment started to grow, and then it became so strong that I thought, oh, you know what? Like I'll just ask Mud, what's that could happen? And then they said no, but obviously. Krishna gave me the intelligence to not get angry at that stage, but I was just like, at least that detached. I was like, yeah, sure. Well, they said no, someone else will say yes. I could move on. But if I had stopped at the point of, like, we have to catch ourselves as early in the process as we can, that saves us from all the trouble going forth. And yeah, exactly. And then willing, and then we start doing it, and just gradually leads to fall down. You start contemplating on the object of senses, gradually fall down. I think Rasika Prabhu has something to say.
Just sort of was gonna, you've kind of already brought it up, but the idea is that, a thought form will present itself to the mind, and you want to avoid even having sangha with it at all. Like, don't even take the second look. And even better than that is to remain consciously and actively aware of Krishna by contemplating him, thinking of him, chanting his name, being constantly engaged in some service for him. Prabhupada said a morning walk, I think in LA, that never let a moment go by without doing something for Krishna, because the moment you stop serving Krishna, Maya is there.
That's a very nice point of how do we save ourselves from that cycle by engaging in devotional service. Because of our own strength, we cannot just, it's hard to not get caught up in that cycle, like the mind presents to us, like this is something nice, when you achieve it, you're going to be happy, and you just start like getting into that cycle. But when you engage in devotional service, Krishna very kindly reminds you, like only by his kind, like reminding of us, then only we'll be able to catch us. So the more we engage in devotional service, that help from Krishna comes very naturally.
So in the beginning, it might seem a little difficult to not take the second look. But there's force of habit and the memory of pleasure that had been experienced. But if you just discipline and force yourself to take shelter of Krishna, then over time it becomes easier and easier. It can become easier quite quickly. And anyway, it may seem like an impossible task, but it's not.
Thank you.
Krishna will reciprocate.
Yeah, Krishna will help us. I think the last translation that we had, it's talking about like the theme, the main topic for today's class was talking about the futility of sense gratification. And Chidvita Maharaj kind of like addressed that yesterday, and we talked about that in the beginning of like today's class. But I was just thinking about the topic, the futility of sense gratification. So what do you understand when someone says that this is futile? Like, what does that mean? Say it louder. It's pointless. That in this case, what is our nature? Like our true nature as souls, we said that we are anandamaya abhyasat, like we desire like pleasure. And so naturally we seek activities which will give us pleasure. And so if the purpose is to get pleasure, if that is the point, and we're engaging in sense gratification and we're thinking we'll get pleasure from that, the futility of sense gratification is means that it's actually pointless. Like the pleasure that you're seeking, it's not there. So initially we don't realize that, but as we're talking about with age, that comes like a big realization that the pleasure that I'm trying to seek, like if you're lucky enough, you get that realization that pleasure that I'm seeking in all this material like objects, that pleasure is not there. But because it's our nature to seek pleasure, until and unless we have a higher taste of a different kind of pleasure, or at least like until we are informed about a different kind of pleasure, until we get a higher taste, naturally we'll keep seeking that pleasure in everything else. So when we see people like out there trying to enjoy their senses, like how can we blame them? Like they don't know anything better to do. It's our natural like tendency to seek pleasure, and that's what they're doing. But because we know that our real like satisfaction comes from serving Krishna, from loving Krishna, we can actually slowly start to realize like why it is futile to spend all our time and resources like enjoying our senses, and it's better to serve Krishna's senses. And do you have one?
Thinking somebody regarding the senses, how in the 20s it's pretty much the senses are the most heightened in the 20s.
Okay, the age.
So anybody who practices bhakti in their youth, that's a big sacrifice, and it's I think very pleasing to Krishna, because we could be doing so many other things.
Yeah, like that. Like we tell that to people who come here that you could be doing so many things. You guys are young, but you decide to come to a program. So really, like we're grateful to them, and actually, honestly, like we should be grateful and feel fortunate that we ourselves, like most of us, like we were introduced to Krishna consciousness in our 20s, and those are the times when the senses are the most heightened. But then we somehow got a higher taste by the mercy of like devotees, and we stuck to this process of devotional service. Let's go on.
There's a comment in the Bhagavatam somewhere, Prabhupada says something like between 15 and 30 or something like that, the senses are very strong. The one who's very sensuous during that period is very disappointed when that short period is over.
Very disciplined?
He's very disappointed when that short period is over. If you're very sensuous during your youth, and when that short period is over, you're very disappointed.
Yeah, people in the 60s and 70s are in their older age, the people who don't know about the devotional service, all they're trying to do is try to replicate the fun that they had when they were 20. And their bodies are not capable of it. Materially, like they're not equipped with that, but that's what they're trying to do. Like they're trying to enjoy the same fun, like the same pleasure that they had when they were in their 20s, but it's quite pointless. But also we're talking that the material pleasure has a beginning and an end. But let's say we talk about spiritual pleasure while being devotees. Like let's say we feel happy by doing some service, we feel happy by chanting, but in our experience, even that is not completely like permanent. It also seems like it has a beginning and an end. So how would you explain someone that spiritual happiness we are seeking in this body does not have a beginning and an end? Like, what would be your response to that? Anyone volunteer? Gopi?
Sure, I'm understanding the question correctly. Like, it's supposed to be something that's constant and
Yeah.
eternal, but why are we experiencing that? It comes
Yeah,
and
like
goes?
why do we come back from that high again? Why can't we just stay enlightened?
So the problem is not with the process, but it's with our application of the process. And devotional service is supposed to be something that's kind of uninterrupted, and something that we that's unmotivated as well, so that we don't have different motivations and strange reasons for trying to practice it. Like even just the idea of seeking happiness, like a material sense of happiness, that's already a improper motivation for approaching devotional service. So yeah, we're still students and we're still learning how to approach Krishna. One day we'll be able to understand bhakti for what it really is, and then it'll just be like the life air that we breathe, and constantly, every second, we will be performing a very pure, unalloyed form of bhakti. So yeah, again, it's not the process, but it's our way of approaching it. There's definitely some gaps and some discrepancies in how we perform our devotional service. So definitely, what you put in, you get out. So if we can just become more determined, apply ourselves well, learn from our mentors, just try our best to perform as many steps as good as possible, then we will have a more sustained, blissful experience.
Yeah, I like that. That one day we'll get to a stage where we feel that this is like everything that we do, and we see that in lives of a lot of like senior devotees like around us. But in the time that we reach that stage, I was thinking we could also say that like material happiness, it has a beginning and an end. Let's say like we want to enjoy our senses by eating an ice cream. This example is commonly given. Like we eat a first ice cream, like we get happy. And if I think the story goes like this, an ice cream seller, like, and you eat an ice cream, and then second one you get an offer that the second one is like, let's say half off, like half price. You feel very happy, you eat a second one. The third one is even like less price. You get another ice cream. Then it's free. You try to get another ice cream, but then you're like just so overfilled like with that sweetness that you cannot take it anymore. And next, if you're even offered, like the ice cream seller says that I'll pay you, like just eat this ice cream, but you're getting a sugar rush and your just mouth is super sweetened out. Like that's the nature of material happiness. Like we do it, but then it's the more we do it, not necessarily that more pleasure we get. Like it has like diminishing returns like over time. But with spiritual happiness, we can see that it's described that it's an ocean of like happiness. The more we do the happiness, the more the happiness increases. And it's up to us we can be intelligent and note down that what our experiences are while doing devotional service, and how when we increase the hearing and the chanting, how that also increases like our continuation of happiness. And then there's that hope that one day when I'll be fully absorbed in this process, that happiness knows no bounds. Like Rahul was mentioning about Prabhupada Priya, that she seems like the most happiest person that we have around us, because she's so immersed in devotional service that our happiness is always like radiating, like is always visible. So it's a very hopeful path that we have with us, that if we don't want to come back from that high, all we have to do is that stick to the process. And I think yesterday Jayadut Maharaj was saying that despite difficulties, when you determine and you stick to the process, ultimately you get to that stage where there is no coming down from that stage. It's Govinda.
Thinking that sometimes we do engage, we can engage like all day and still not feel something, right? So then I was thinking, why is it that we can be engaged in devotional service but still not feel completely happy? For different reasons, but not one reason that I think Gopi didn't mention was the three modes of material nature. That sometimes we go up and then we feel something, but then most of the time we're in the modes. So that's the reason I feel like over time, as we purify ourselves, you get to that purity where you can actually be.
Yeah, the amazing thing is that although in the beginning it seems like we can liken material happiness to spiritual happiness, it has a beginning and an end. still there's something more to it. Otherwise, why would people still stay in Krishna consciousness for 30, 40 years and not like go away, but they're definitely getting a higher taste. And in that case, when we have doubts, if we cannot use our own intelligence and use our own experiences, then we can look at others who have stayed for 40, 50 years. Like they have found some like nectar, some juice in this process, which means that there's something I haven't like, could be a curiosity, like what is it that they're experiencing that they could be this happy all the time and they could stay in this process for that time. So like maybe let me like try to get their association, ask them what is the secret, and ultimately let me try to stick to this process that I can get to that stage, because that looks like a wonderful stage. Like when I see like some senior Prabhupada disciples or like senior disciples like around us, like how can they be like the qualities that we read about in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, the wonderful like devotional qualities, like how can they possess those qualities like so effortlessly, like it's their nature. So what did they do that they could be so attractive as like devotees? So that could make us like try a little harder, and ultimately we'll get to that stage. Advaita Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, it takes time, right? It takes time. Anything valuable in this world, if you want to obtain, it will take time. And the problem today is like we live in a world where there's like so prominent this instant gratification. Right? We want it yesterday. So without patience and faith, we can't really, and also price to pay. We have to pay the price of anartha nivritti, to come to the point of nishtha, or steadiness. What separates us from steadiness, from nishtha, is going through the dark night of the soul, going through that grind, if you wish, and paying that price. Because it's not like we are natural born pure devotees. We're naturally born
conditioned souls.
Yeah, conditioned souls, yeah. So there's a price to pay. Just like for anything valuable. You want to go to the diamond store, or you want to go to the Family Dollar or Five Below here on the university. So you gotta, depends on what you want. You can be cheated. Also in spiritual, you can be cheated.
If you have the cheating desire, you
yeah,
get cheated.
And we see people get cheated all the time. Cheaters and cheated.
Thank you. Did you have a comment?
Sometimes one of the traps of Maya is that you practice devotional service properly, right? You do your service, you get happy from it, or a kirtan. And then when you get that happiness, you feel so good. And then you turn back to what used to make you feel good. It's like, oh, I'm in such a good mood. I'm going to go get like 5 ice cream cones. It's like that thing you were talking about. You keep eating more and more. So sometimes my guru says that Maya gets up early. So she's really good at her job. And we have to look for the little like kind of pitfalls she puts in front of us. So taking that happiness that we're feeling and then going and in our happiness, trying to find sense gratification, if we could just use that happiness to have gratitude to Krishna in that service, and then do even more. When we get that happiness, can help us avoid those pitfalls.
And like stick to the process. Either use our intelligence or the intelligence of people around us, get like guidance. And we mentioned about this stage of nishtha, which translates as steadiness. And I just wanted to make a comment on this. Like it was quite interesting. Like point that we read, like steadiness in one's own position is declared to be actual piety. And the purport, the disciple Srila Prabhupada is describing that, like we're talking like material gratification, sense gratification is futile, and spiritual pleasure is eternal. But to get to that stage, we have to be steady. The process is gradual, so we have to stick to the process. So the disciples of Srila Prabhupada who are commenting are talking about how we have to be careful based on what situation we are at, and like we can be steady in the part in the position or the situation of devotional service that we are at. And when we try to copy someone who is at a higher stage, that might lead to negative consequences for us. And also what was mentioned in a further verse, that we have to distinguish between good or bad based on what's helping me in going forward in devotional service. If based on the stage I am at, a particular activity is helping me go further, then that is favorable devotional service. And if it's not helping me be steady in my practice, being steady could just mean that being regulated in our sleeping and our eating and waking up in the morning, just that. So what's helping me be regulated in my chanting? So that those things are favorable for me in devotional service. And what's stopping me from being regulated in my chanting and my doing my sadhana, those things are unfavorable to devotional service. And also there's a point mentioned here that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that it's better to do one's own duty even though it's imperfect, rather than do someone else's duty even though you might be better at it. So again, Krishna says that based on our own nature, we should adopt activities which are suitable according to our own nature. And if we stick to those activities which are suitable to our nature, and it might be difficult for us to figure out what's our nature, but based on advice from sadhu and shastra and guru, if we find that activity which is suitable for our nature and we stick to that activity, even though we might be imperfect at the beginning stage, there is no loss. We'll keep gradually making progress. So Kalkana Prabhu always emphasizes that we should try to get to that stage of being steady. We don't have to do something exceptional or feel like we're doing something amazing in devotional service, always feel ecstatic, but that phase of being steady is what attracts Krishna's mercy. That's a small goal we can have in front of us. Being steady, and we can try to be steady in our chanting. Just first thing, if we just try to achieve that, then all other good things will slowly follow. That's all I had to say. Yeah, we'll accept some comments. Rasika Prabhu.
One of the things that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur brings out in his Madhurya Kadambini, which goes through the rungs in the ladder to pure devotion, and starts out right at the beginning, is he makes the point to realize that no matter what stage you're at, even if that's the beginning and you have all kinds of degradations and so forth that you've participated in, and it seems really hard, that the process is equally powerful to purify the heart, no matter which stage you're at. The holy name acts equivalently in the beginning, middle, and end, because it's absolute. And of course, it entails that we have to try to chant attentively and all of those things, but it's always having an effect. It infallibly acts no matter what. As long as the Shastra says, even if we chant inimically, the holy name will have an effect. What to say if we are chanting sincerely? So to just have faith that if we go on chanting, it's acting, even though you don't sense it, you don't feel it right away. The holy name is acting on the heart, and it's wiping the dust off of the mirror of the heart. The mirror is pristine. It just needs to be cleaned. Everything's there already in the heart.
I like that part about even though when we don't see that purification is being done, the purification is actually being done. So even at times when we don't, that stage of being steady is even on those days that we don't feel like chanting, we don't tell ourselves that I don't feel as happy as chanting. Maybe I should try doing something else. I should ignore my chanting and try watching a movie or just talking to my friends. Maybe that will make me happy. But that process of sticking to the chanting, this is what is prescribed for me, and it made me happy before, and just that commitment to the process is what draws Krishna's attention, that this person is wants to get something higher than just material sense gratification, and is trying. And because he's trying, I will reward him accordingly. And real progress is made at those times when we probably don't feel like we're making any progress, but we're still like sticking to the script or like sticking to the process that's prescribed. Thank you very much. Okay, last comment by Gopi Prabhu.
There was like a theme or a specific point that came out throughout our discussions that I'd like to just highlight again, because I think it's very important. And that's the idea of higher taste, which you were speaking about, and others hinted at it as well. Because at some, on this topic of the senses and the objects of the senses, the contemplation, the attachments that arise, we said that there must be some degree of discipline and just forcing yourself to, refrain. And that's definitely a fact, and that's definitely a skill we should have, just to be able to be a little stern with the mind. But there's a limitation to it, and that shouldn't be your main modus operandi. And that can actually lead to quite some problems if you're just constantly trying to use the sheer force of your own willpower. That's the kind of thing the yogis do. And on the path of renunciation, that's usually the method. But that can make the heart very hard. We should have that skill, but our main flow of momentum comes from higher taste. I was speaking to Meet yesterday, and it's actually this idea of rasa. Rasa is really what drives us. And when we're talking about the mind and controlling the mind, we have to realize that the mind is actually just following the heart. So in our Krishna consciousness, we have to make some effort to find the things that really give us some rasa, some taste, some exceptional experience that will attract our hearts and capture our hearts. Usually, I was also telling you yesterday, usually it's connections with devotees that gives rasa. So firstly, we can find a service that fits us and inspires us, and then we can connect that service to a person and to serving and pleasing a person. Usually, that's the guru, of course. So, and that's what can help us go through the anartha nivritti and these difficult stages. If there's enough rasa, we just keep going and going.
Like depending on the good experiences that we have had, like the juice that we have tasted, that'll keep us going through the bad times. Yeah. Very nice. Thank you, Prabhu. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Premanande. Yajnaseshtha sinasanto machante sarvakil vishay bhunjate